Coming to you from the boring streets of Rishiden on the plain of Mercadia, it's Tap Tap Concede.
Woo! How's it going, guys?
Hi, everybody.
This is Tap Tap Concede. As you can see, Graham is not with us this week, so you will have to make do with myself. I am James. With me is...
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Jer.
And Jer's here.
Yay! Graham is a scrub with no dedication.
Yep.
Clearly, no. He's in
Clearly,
Seattle.
that's what's happening. So, Jer, what are we going to talk about today?
Today we are going to talk about my story of getting into Legacy.
All right. But first, before we talk about a format that I can't afford, let's roll dice and crack a pack.
All right. What
Hopefully
do we got?
one of the ones that
ready?
I can't afford.
Are you ready?
We got a D12.
We got a D12. We got 12 packs of cards. We got a 7. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Ooh.
We're cracking Nemesis.
Nemesis.
Ooh.
So, Jer, you were playing when Nemesis was out around, were you?
Nope. That was during the donut hole.
The donut hole?
That would be, I think, the same for almost all of us.
Yeah. I stopped around Visions, possibly I guess not Mercadian Masks. What was that set? The one that came after Visions. It wasn't Tempest. It was between Visions and Tempest.
Yeah.
The one that introduced the Weatherlight crew.
Oh, there's no flavor
No,
text.
they don't do the flavor.
Oh,
text.
Weatherlight. It was called Weatherlight. I stopped playing around that set.
All right, looks like this pack of cards came out in 2000.
So lots of time. All right, let's crack it. Let's see what we got.
If you are listening to this podcast and you're younger than this booster, just reflect on that for a moment.
Dear God. All right, first up we have Stampede Driver. It is a green shapeshifter, 1 green mana for a 1/1.
Okay.
But for 1 and a green and tap it, discard a card from your hand. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. I mean,
I'm thinking of ways where that is good.
this is really format. I think it's really format specific. You're already throwing one card into a 1/1 for 1.
and that's never, ever, ever good. I mean, maybe sometimes it's okay, but I don't think it's good here.
Sometimes maybe 2 mana for a really, or 2 cards for a really bad overrun is good.
Yeah.
I don't know when that is, but
I'm trying to think of like situations where you'd want to do that. Like maybe you have extra land in your hand. It's late game and it's just going to push you over the edge. Maybe you want to dump stuff in your bin because you got some reanimation targets. You're playing like a black-green deck.
yeah.
I mean, like there are corner cases galore.
Yep.
It's true. All right, we're actually going to... That's an uncommon.
Okay.
Because this is back when they stacked commons first. So I'm actually going to go to the back now so we can continue with the commons. First common we have is Seal of Doom. For 2 and a black, you have an enchantment. Sacrifice Seal of Doom. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated.
Terror is good.
Yeah,
Terror's a good card.
always good.
It's terror on a stick.
So play it. It sits there. It does nothing until you sacrifice it. But when you do, it's pretty good.
Well, and the thing is, they can't even use instant speed enchantment removal on it because you just sacrifice it in response.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they can't counter it.
They
so
can.
if you play it out and it's countered, then you're
but that's
kind of
any.
hosed.
They,
But that's the
they
same.
can counter a
Yeah.
Doomblade or a terror.
Yep.
I think the thing is it's sorcery speed if you just want to play it and kill something. But if you play it first, then it can sit around and kill
And
something at
threaten
instant
something.
speed later.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next up is another 1/1 for 1. This time it's Trickster Mage. She is a spell shaper.
Okay.
This is the same thing. 1 blue tap, discard a card from your hand, tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land.
So like the spell shapers in general are not bad, right? Like they basically are like you can turn any card into your hand into another card. In this case, that card is Twiddle.
Yeah.
Which is not historically very good.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that if it was discard a card, bounce a creature, that would be pretty okay. I'd run a 1/1 for that, but I don't know about Twiddle.
I mean, constantly being able to bounce and discard or with a discard team's pretty good.
I mean, that's probably OP, but just let me live my dreams, okay?
All right, that's fair. Next up, Seal of Cleansing. For 1 and a white, you get an enchantment. Wow. Okay, so all these. Okay. Sacrifice Seal of Cleansing, destroy target artifact or enchantment.
So probably we're not main decking this in this set where we have seen no artifacts or no, we've seen the seals.
See, it's a Seal of Doom. It's like
So I like how we're the 4 cards we've named so far are clearly part of
Cycles.
a cycle.
Yeah, the thing is,
which
I'm not
pretty
going to run
funny.
a Seal of Cleansing to get rid of a Seal of Doom.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you do. Who knows? Oh, here we go. Something that isn't one of the things we've already done. Parallax Dementia. For 1 and a black, you have an enchant creature. It has Fading 1. And I'll read you the reminder text for Fading. This enchantment comes into play with 1 fade counter on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a fade counter from it. If you can't, sacrifice it. So this lasts for basically 1 turn. It enchants creatures. The enchanted creature gets +3/+2. And when this leaves play, destroy enchanted creature. That creature can't be regenerated.
Wow, that is awful.
I mean, not necessarily.
Or do you put it on your opponent's creature?
Yeah, if you put it on your opponent's creature and they can't do anything with it, it's still a really bad terror.
Yep.
I mean, this is just like an unstable mutation, but not nearly as good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever want to play this on your own creature. Unless you're desperate. And
You can.
I mean, if you
swing for lethal with
Yeah,
it, like it
I
could
mean-
be like a lava axe or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Mog Toady. For 1 and a red, you get a 2/2 for a goblin.
But if it's a Mog, it means it's
It
one of those
means
can't attack or block.
Mog Toady can't attack unless you control more creatures than defending player.
Oh,
and it
no.
And it can't block unless you control more creatures than attacking player.
So this is deceptive because I think it sounds a lot worse than it is. Keep in mind that the toady itself is a creature. So like the fact that it counts for itself, if you're playing it on curve and you're on the play, you're probably in a good spot. If you're playing a really aggressive deck, you're probably in a good spot. I don't think this guy's that bad, but I think that we don't want downsides on our bears for the most part.
Yeah, I feel that if I was going to play a 2/2 for 2, I'd want it to be at least a vanilla 2/2 for 2, or maybe have a very marginal corner case upside. This is a 2/2 for 2 with a drawback.
Yeah.
If it was a 3/3 for 2, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about
Keep in
running
mind
this.
though that creatures are probably less powerful in general at this point, so
That's
I'm not
true.
sure. This could actually be a good card, but it's probably something that's going to wheel around the table once.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next up, and I love this card, Sky Shroud Ridgeback.
Ooh, sounds exotic.
It's a beast. For 1 green, you get a 2/3.
Wow.
That sounds good.
And what's the drawback?
What's wrong with it? Can you guess what's wrong with this card?
It has like fading 1, so it sticks around for 1 turn.
Fading 2.
Whoa.
Actually.
So we get to attack with it once.
Well, you play it, you put 2 counters on it. Next turn, you remove a counter and attack.
Oh, yeah, okay, so
you
we
have
get to,
twice.
We get to attack with it twice. That
seems
fine.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm always going to play that kind of card. I love that kind of card. It's hilarious. All right, next up, Flame Rift. For 1 and a red, Flame Rift deals 4 damage to each player. It is sorcery, but it is just 4 damage to the face.
This is the first legacy playable card that we have seen in this pack.
How is that legacy playable?
Because in a burn deck, you don't care about your life total for the most part. You
Yep.
just want to do 4 damage to their dome for 2 mana and 1 card.
Yeah, that seems
That's fair.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Orazid, I guess. Oraxid. 3 and a blue, you get a 2/3, and it's protection from red.
Sure.
I mean, in general, a 2/3 for 4 is not the greatest,
But
but
it has some sort of marginal corner case upside, though.
yeah, it does. I mean, if you go up against, if you're going up against a red deck, this card is.
I will
sick.
play this card in my deck a lot of the time. It's not going to be like I'm super excited about playing it, but it's going to show up in my decks.
That's fair.
Well, considering quality of the creatures we've seen, this seems pretty good,
Yeah.
actually.
It's true.
It blocks that stupid bear.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Cloud Skate.
Oh, I like this card.
Yeah, for 1 and a blue, you get a 2/2 flyer. It has fading 3.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Seems fine.
again, you're just playing this card every day.
That's fantastic.
Yep. All right. Next up, Topple. 2 and a white for sorcery. Remove target creature with the greatest power from the game. That's an interesting removal spell. I think that's pretty good.
Maybe it's gonna.
mean-
Yeah, it's very situational, but I think you probably play that card.
I think I like that card because if you're sort of like in a race situation, you just snap it off early to kill the if they have something that's even like, like a 3/2 and you only have a 2/2, you're just like, there you go. And then if you draw it late game, maybe you can get rid of their threat.
Yeah. I think I'm playing taking the terror over this basically any
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
But yeah, this.
But if I'm in white, I'm not too upset to play that.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for another creature that's
interesting ruling on this one. You choose the creature with the greatest power. But if that's no longer the creature with the greatest power at resolution, it's countered because it can only target the creature with the greatest power. So if you target his like 3/3 guy and in response he giant growths a different guy, then the whole thing gets countered.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You also get the giant growth out of his hand. And he has to do that on your turn too, right? Because
it's a
it's sorcery.
Yep.
So I mean, perhaps the greatest upside for this is that you go to kill his big dude. He pumps your dude to counter the spell because he doesn't want to lose his dude.
Yeah.
But you do it before you attack, and then you can attack with a huge dude until end of turn.
Yeah.
All right.
Living the dream.
Ready for another creature that's overpowered for what its casting cost is? 3/3 for 1 and a black in Spiteful Bully.
Ooh.
It's a mercenary. But there, of course, is a downside. At the beginning of your upkeep, Spiteful Bully deals 3 damage to target creature you control.
Oh.
Every turn, eh?
Every turn. So, I mean...
And it'll kill itself, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that this is probably not the card that I want to be playing.
That's
No.
fair.
I mean, if you had like some big black fatty, but then you're only getting a 3/3.
Yeah, there's a dedicated mercenary deck that I think might want that, but I don't think that this is... that in just my normal black decks, that's the kind of thing I want.
No.
Yeah. All right, next up, back to the uncommons. For 4, Viseline. It's a 2/2 artifact creature. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Viseline deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of cards in his or her hand -4.
So nothing?
Yeah, so I don't want to play this card.
So sorry, it's a 2/2 for 4?
2/2 for 4.
Yeah.
At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep.
Yeah, it's a black vice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, because look at the art.
Yeah. I think this card is fine. I think this card goes in, like, again, it's not going to be like a super high pick a lot of the time, but it goes in any deck. It's a 2/2 for 4, which is granted not good, but it might be a 23rd card a lot of the time. 2/2 for 4 with marginal upside, whatever, sometimes it gets in.
Well, I mean, the thing is, by the time you cast it, though, how many like you're casting it on turn 4 the earliest, you probably only have 4 cards left in hand.
I guess what I'm saying is it's a creature with that is not a 1/1 that goes in any deck, so it's going to get played as a 23rd card sometimes.
All right, I will give this a D- on the Marshall and or on the Limited Resources School of Card rating. What do you give it, Jer?
Probably somewhere around there. Like, I'm not happy to play
Yeah,
this card a
I-
lot of the time, but
But you're like, I'm desperate.
All right, next up is Laccolith Warrior. For
Okay.
2 red, you get a 3/3 creature beast. When Laccolith Warrior becomes blocked, you may have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature.
Oh,
If you do, Laccolith Warrior deals no combat damage this turn.
that
okay.
card seems sick.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that seems
Because
really
it's like,
good.
I block it. All right, I kill your blocker.
Yeah.
Right? And then, of course, the combat damage doesn't go through to your... to like the person you're attacking, but you still got their dude out of the way, so chances are half the time they're just going to let it walk on through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yep, that seems pretty good. All right, here we go. The rare Sliptide Serpent.
It's the guy that's on the pack.
It's the guy that is on the pack.
Yep.
For 4 blue, you get a 4/4 Serpent.
Okay.
For 3 in a blue, return Sliptide Serpent to its owner's hand.
Right, so if they try to Seal
Boring.
of Doom it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Nope.
No.
I'll just replay this for... I don't
That-
know. I'm taking
that
the
is
Laccolith
like-
Warrior.
That is like the most unexciting rare.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
It's
I
on
feel-
the back.
I feel like I'm probably still taking the Terror.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Seal of Doom or... Yeah, I could see taking the Warrior.
The Warrior is
The
like...
Warrior or the Terror seem like the two.
I think so.
I also like the Cloud Skate just because
Yeah.
a 2/2 flyer for 2 is
That thing
pretty
is strong.
freaking good. Yeah. All right, there was our Crack-a-Pack.
Hooray.
Let's talk about Legacy.
Hey. Okay. So
So, Jer, can you tell us exactly what Legacy is for the more
Yeah, actually do that
casual
first.
players who are not familiar?
Sure. There's a couple of different ways I could do that, but once upon a time, there was just Magic.
'Kay.
And you wanted to play in a tournament, you went to a Magic tournament, and that's what you played was Magic. And
But
you could
that's not the case anymore, is
No.
it, Jer?
So then they realized that some cards were really, really powerful, and so they said, "Well, we don't want to tell people they can't play their cards, so we'll say that they can only play one." So they created the restricted list for Magic, and that included your Moxen and your Black Lotus and a bunch of other cards that were just like really overpowered. Then at some point they also realized, well, we want people to be able to play, like put together a deck out of newer cards and play and not feel like they have to invest in all these old cards that because you're only allowed to play one of, you play one in every single deck.
Right.
So Type 2 came along, and Type 2 was you can only use the last 2 blocks worth of sets. That's what we call standard now.
Right.
But
keeps the card turnover high and isn't like completely incomprehensible for new players as well, which is nice.
Exactly. So it allows new players to get into the game a little bit more easily, and of course, standard at the time was pretty contentious, but has gone on to become like the most popular format. Now there was
probably for those reasons I just mentioned.
Right. So there's a group of people who are like, well, we don't want to have to go and invest in like all these expensive one-of cards like Moxes and Lotuses and whatnot, Moxen, and but we want to be able to play with all our cards that we've got over the years. What do we do? And so over time, something called Type 1.5 came into being.
Right, this is for the brewers of the world who wanted to make weird decks using all cards.
Using all cards, but still have the sort of really, really powerful, expensive stuff locked out. And so that was Type 1.5,
Okay.
and that existed for a while. Flash forward many years, and we now have a bunch of different ways to play Magic. The oldest is called Vintage, and Vintage is what we used to just call Magic. So it still has a restricted list, but cards that don't like completely crack the game open are just restricted instead of banned. So like Shahrazad is banned, I believe, because it creates this sub-game that takes a long time, and that's annoying. But cards like your Moxens and your Balances and whatnot, Balance might actually be banned. I think it's still restricted, though. They're just restricted to 1 per deck.
Right.
So, and it's not really a joke to say that to start building those decks, you take one of each of those restricted cards and you put it in your deck.
So that's Vintage.
That's Vintage.
Okay, so how is that different from Modern then?
So modern is just basically all of the sets from 8th edition forward. So they basically said we need to draw a line somewhere, and they drew it at 8th edition. And the reason that they did that, one of the main reasons, is that's when they changed the borders of the cards. So it's easy to differentiate something that came out before then and after then. Something that I forgot to mention about Type 1.5, when it originally was conceived, what Type 1.5 was you can play any card, but anything on the restricted list from Vintage is banned. So those cards were all banned. The legacy list that exists now, the legacy banned list that exists now, has evolved considerably from then, so it's now completely independent of Vintage. But that was the idea at the time. So Modern is 8th edition forward. Legacy is still what it was, which is anything you want minus this fairly large banned list based on things that have historically broken the game.
Okay, and then, all right, so hold on. Okay, so we have Standard, which is the last 2 blocks. We have Modern, which is the 8th edition forward, aka Black Cardboarders forward.
Well, yeah, it's actually like the new style of border.
Yeah, so not this.
Yeah.
And
And then we have Legacy, which is everything.
Everything minus certain really broken cards.
And then Vintage, which is what you're playing.
No, I'm playing Legacy.
Legacy is everything minus some broken cards, and Vintage is just go nuts.
Vintage is go nuts, but you can only have one of cards that really crack the game open.
Okay. So why did you decide you wanted to start playing Legacy then?
Okay, there were a couple of reasons. One, there's a really good Legacy scene in Victoria. We've got a lot of people who are really into Legacy, and they go to tournaments nearby and whatnot. And around the world, there are not a huge number of people who play Legacy, period. So to have a concentration of them in Victoria is already a pretty cool thing. One of the main reasons, though, was a sort of financial reason. And what that comes down to is as you play cards that come out, go into Standard for a while. And if they're really powerful in Standard, they get quite expensive. And they stay expensive for a little while. And then after that, they rotate out and they lose a lot of their value. Mm-hmm. And that's a cycle that sort of happens continuously. So if you have like a set of new dual lands, and they're not particularly good dual lands, they're just sort of mediocre, like the temples right now, they come out and they're like $5 to $10-ish for the year that they come out in. The next year, they're usually a little bit more because they're not being drafted anymore, so they're harder to get. So they go up in value a little bit, but then they rotate out. and they tank in value. They go down to like, $2 or $3.
Yeah, but then eventually they start regaining their value.
Some cards do, but not all cards do. And
Right.
whether or not they do depends on whether they're playable in Modern or Legacy. If a card is not playable in Modern or Legacy, then it's not going to gain much value. So you look at the Scars of Mirrodin lands, which were, they were used a lot in Standard, but they're not really applicable in Modern, and they're certainly not in Legacy. Those things have stuck around very low value. So
Okay. But at the same time, the Snaplands from Zendikar and like that block have been, because they actually like thin your deck and
Right.
are good. They've sort of gone up in value.
They've increased in value 10 times since they rotated out of Standard. Some of them anyway. So I guess what it came down to is I realized the cards that are good in Modern and Legacy are the cards that really retain their value. And I don't want the value of my collection to just drop off. So I want to be trading aggressively for the cards that are good in Modern and Legacy. Those are the ones that are going to at least maintain their value or possibly go up. And so that's sort of what took me down the road of, well, okay, let's go for it. Let's take a bunch of these let's take my Standard decks and a bunch of these Modern decks that I've sort of got half completed. And I had a bunch of them. I had like 10 half completed Modern decks and like a few Standard decks, and just aggressively trade those into a Legacy deck, because that's where I know that my value is safe.
Ah, okay. So even though legacy decks are very expensive to put together, you figure it's actually a good investment in the long term.
Yeah, Legacy is what we term like a slowly rotating format. So like Standard rotates, and it's forced to rotate basically every year. Every year, one big set rotates out and a new one rotates in along with a core set. So what decks are good in Standard will change yearly, and sometimes you get lucky and your deck like lasts 2 years. Sometimes it's it's good, and then it loses a bunch of its stuff, but it gets a bunch of new stuff, and it's still good. But then almost assuredly after 2 years, it's gone.
Right.
Modern rotates more slowly, but Wizards is pretty aggressive in changing up the ban list in Modern as well to try and shake things up and keep it interesting and whatnot, or at least they have been. It rotates a little bit quicker, and also the power level of cards in Modern is a lot lower than Legacy, so there's a much greater chance that new cards that are released can do something. For example, like I could see the Jace that came out in Return to Ravnica doing something in Modern potentially, whereas that card would never be played in Legacy because Jace the Mind Sculptor is legal in Legacy.
And he's just a million times better. So
right. So in general, if you have two cards that do kind of the same thing, they're going to you're going to go in whatever format to the most powerful one available.
Okay, so all right, so deciding to do this financial thing, you start trading aggressively into a legacy deck. What kind of legacy deck did you decide you wanted to put together?
So I am traditionally a sort of white weenie / aggro deck player in tournaments. I've tried other routes, but I tend to like playing aggressive decks because I can take a lunch break more frequently or when I want to.
Right, because your games aren't dragging out for 45 minutes. Right. It's this epic control battle.
Exactly. So the deck that I was attracted to initially was Death and Taxes. And Death and Taxes is it looks like a white weenie deck. It has a lot of the trappings of a white weenie deck. It has Ether Vial to get your creatures out quickly and get a head start on your opponent. It has small creatures like Thalia and Phyrexian Revoker.
Many of these are newer creatures, actually.
Yeah, a lot of them are not.
The Ether Vial's old, but
Ether Vial is kind of old. Thalia's been out for a little while. Importantly, though, like Thalia is another card that we can look at and go, this is clearly a legacy card. It is a card that didn't really do anything in Standard, at least like not much of anything. It was like played in sideboards and things, but it is a legacy mainstay. And so that's
Paul's bringing it up on the screen, but she gives your creatures first strike.
She's a 2/1 first striker, and she makes all non-creature spells cost an additional 1 to play. So what I'm getting to with this deck is it looks like an aggro deck,
right.
But in fact, as far as Legacy is concerned, it's a control deck. There is the fast deck in Legacy is not Burn or White Weenie or whatever else. The fast deck is the combo deck, and that's something where Legacy is very different from most other formats. Is that you can have turn 2 combo decks.
Oh, because you can do stuff like put out some Moxes and
You can't use Moxen in Legacy. They're all banned.
Okay.
But you can have a storm deck that just storms out on turn 1 or 2. That can happen.
Well, can you Dark Ritual for extra mana?
Right, you can Dark Ritual for extra mana. You can use Lotus Petals to get extra mana. Basically, what the Storm deck is looking to do is cast, Diabolic Tutor? It's the one that costs 2 mana, and if your hand is empty, is a Demonic Tutor, but otherwise it is much more limited. So you cast that, and while it's on the stack, you sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond to create 3 mana and discard your hand. Then you can tutor for Tendrils of Agony and play that. And if you've done enough like ritualing and whatnot before that, you can conceivably storm out on turn 1, but it's more likely that it's going to hit on turn 2 or 3. So, what every deck in Legacy is sort of concerned with is dealing with combo.
Making sure that what you just described doesn't happen.
Right. You don't want what I just described to happen to you. There's a lot of really powerful decks that use really backwards ways to win the game very quickly. Dredge is another interesting example of a deck that does stuff like Dredge. There's manaless Dredge. Literally plays no lands. It relies on an engine where you discard cards and then use those cards to get more cards into your graveyard, and eventually through a whole bunch of backward stuff, get a giant Golgari Grave Troll onto the battlefield and kill your opponent with that, or I don't know. It's weird and backwards. You don't want to die to these decks is basically what Legacy is sort of built around.
So that's why the Death and Taxes deck, even though it looks like White Weenie, is controlled because you're trying to interrupt this combo.
You're trying to interrupt combos in general, and how you're going to win with Death and Taxes is by making all your opponent's spells less good, and then killing them with some sort of like brute force to the face, Sarah Avenger or Flicker Wisp, something with 3 power and flying that can get past most of the stuff in the format, and not die.
All right. So you originally decided to do that, and then you decided to do something else.
No, I didn't actually. That is the road that I went on.
Oh,
but
I thought you were playing a different deck.
No, Death and Taxes is where I went, but I was surprised that having not played a lot of Legacy, the deck played out a lot slower than I thought it would. So it's been an interesting sort of learning experience to figure out how to play it in Legacy on top of actually putting it together.
So what does the Legacy community look like in Victoria? Like
in terms of like what kind of decks you see?
What kind of decks are you seeing? Are you seeing the top tier decks? Like, would you consider Death and Taxes a top tier deck?
It's weird. Like a lot of people say Death and Taxes is not super top tier. It's sort of like a B tier deck.
Sure.
It's historically a budget deck, even though the cards in it, since it's become very popular, have gone up in value considerably, making it not much more budget than anything else in Legacy ever is.
Is it popular because it was a budget deck?
One of the reasons that it's popular is because it was a budget deck.
Right.
But it's not really that budget anymore, especially if you want to put it together in paper. So it's sort of considered a B tier deck, but it's won a couple GPs and it's and Star City Opens. So like it's powerful. It can do what it's trying to do, and if piloted well, and I'm not gonna claim that I'm an excellent pilot, it is very powerful and effective at shutting down a lot of the big boogeymen in the format. So
okay,
the Victoria scene has actually it's pretty representative of a lot of what the actual full Legacy scene is. There's a lot of Delver. I guess the North American Legacy scene. There's not a lot of Delver in Europe apparently, but so yeah, we've got a bunch of different Delver decks that show up, and Delver is basically the same deck as you would see in or you saw in Standard and could see in Modern. It's just doing a lot more powerful things.
Because it has access to even better spells.
It has Brainstorm. It has Stifle. It has a lot of just very powerful cards that are not accessible in other formats.
Right.
We've got some Miracles players. So and that's just control. That's straight up blue-white control. Sometimes it has red in there. And again, it's control, but they get to play Brainstorm along with Miracles to put Miracles on top of their deck. It's just a very, very powerful version of a deck you're familiar with.
Okay.
Then we have a couple of combo decks. We have someone who does play Storm every week. We have...
It's not Cam.
I was just going to say,
no, it's not Cam,
isn't it?
It's not Cam, surprisingly. It's Brett. He plays Storm basically every week. We have more merfolk than you would normally see in the Legacy metagame overall. We've got two consistent merfolk players.
Isn't merfolk also regarded as one of the like more affordable ways to get in?
Yeah, merfolk is actually a pretty cheap way to get into Legacy. It does play Wasteland, which is expensive. Beyond that, the most expensive thing in it is True Name Nemesis, and that has come down in value significantly.
Yeah.
So it's, oh yeah, Force of Will. Sorry, it also plays Force of Will.
Okay, but I mean, still, as compared to like decks where they have like multiple land colors they need to support and stuff, or like multiple mana colors with a land base. And
yeah, as a monocolored deck, it's definitely cheaper. And Death and Taxes being entirely white has a cheaper mana base as well.
Right.
Not super cheap because it plays Caracas and Wasteland and Rishadan Port, but it's there.
Right.
So yeah, I've played against some Sneak and Show. Sneak and Show uses Sneak Attack and Show and Tell to get Grizzlebrands and Emrakuls into play earlier than it should.
Nice.
My deck is really good against those because it plays Caracas, which is a legendary land that you can tap to bounce a legendary creature. So if they put a Grizzlebrand or an Eldrazi into play, they don't get the come into play in effect, and I can just bounce it back to their hand, and they can never play it again because they can't actually afford it. Yeah. So yeah, my deck is basically just designed to try and make all those decks less good and win the fair way with creatures like Magic should be played. The joke.
So
though,
it's fun police then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's exactly. But the catch is that the fun that I'm stopping is actually not fun, because it like watching a Storm player dirtle around for 20 minutes as he figures out how to kill you is not the greatest. I don't know. There's some people playing other combo decks like Food Chain and Alarin and whatnot, and I don't have time to describe all these decks, but they're really interesting to look at. So definitely go check them out and look them up.
Okay.
So just go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say. So wrapping up.
Yeah.
I am a Magic player. I think that what you just talked about is a really good idea. How do I start playing?
Okay, so here is what I'm going to say. It's not cheap to get into Legacy, and it's a good long-term goal.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say is, like, choose a deck that you are interested in. Legacy doesn't rotate very quickly. So
is there a place that I could go look at deck lists?
I use mtggoldfish.com, which gives you a breakdown of a lot of different metagames. So you can like go standard, modern, Legacy, whatever, and see what people are playing. And it tells you which decks are most popular, and you can sort of from that get an idea as to what decks are winning and things like that.
Okay, and then it shows you what's in the decks and stuff.
Yeah,
so
exactly, and it actually gives you the general prices of things in the deck too. So if you want to like sort of figure out what you might be interested in trying for, but what I'm getting to is it's a long-term prospect. It's not something that you're going to be able to trade into in like a month or two. It's more like basically
depends on your collection.
Depends on your collection, but for most people,
yeah, like
what you're going to need to do is build up value, because a lot of these cards are so expensive that so if I've got $180 land, I'm not going to be interested in trading that for 36 $5 lands. However much you might want me to, I'm just not interested.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like a long, slow process of going, I've got two $5 cards, can I turn them into a $10 card? I've got two $10 cards, can I turn them into a $20 card? Over a very long period of time. The cards that you want to watch out for are cards that are played in Modern and Legacy. Modern is becoming more of a thing now, so that's good, because you can start like looking at those cards that you're seeing in Modern decks and say, okay, I want to make that a trading target. You can also try and effectively look at cards that are played in Legacy and in current sets, because those will almost surely go up in value. So like Deathrite Shaman and Abrupt Decay,
right?
Those are like in every single Legacy deck. So maybe those are things that you want to look at trading for, because they're going to hold their value really well, if not go up.
Okay,
Sweet.
So out of curiosity, how long did it take you to trade into Death and Taxes?
It took me about 3 months, but keep in mind I had already a lot of equity built up. Like I had years of Magic cards that I had been collecting, and so it was a little bit easier for me to trade in. And
you're probably the most aggressive trader I know.
Thank you. I took some shortcuts though. Like I did straight up sell a bunch of my cards and flip the money around to buy a bunch of the cards that I needed.
Right.
So and when you're doing that, you are typically losing a lot of the value, but sometimes as well when you're trading up, if you're trying to trade a bunch of $5 into a $20 card, maybe you'll have to trade five $5 cards into a $20 card just to make it worth the while for the person with the higher value card.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're losing value either way. And I traded very, very aggressively and lost a lot of value in what I could have kept if I had traded slowly over time.
Right. All right.
Sweet.
Cool.
Yep.
So Legacy,
is a thing. It's fun. It's something that you're probably not going to be that interested in if you don't have a community to play it with, because frankly, you can put together this really expensive, awesome deck, but it's not going to be that great. But I do suggest making sure that you trade fairly aggressively towards things that are going to be good in Modern and Legacy going forward, and try and learn to identify those cards and sort of skew your binder in that direction, because that's the kind of stuff that you're going to be able to hold on to and is going to retain the value of your collection.
Okay. You know what we should do, Jer, is this pretty much wraps up our discussion of this, but we should have you on again to talk about like how to trade well.
Yes.
Because that is definitely an art. I don't know anything about it. I don't like trading. I don't like haggling and bartering, so I typically just don't.
Yeah.
But a lot of people would probably really appreciate the tips. Turn that draft shash into cash.
Ooh.
That's
like
what
the
we could
cat's
call it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So
All
thank
right.
you for joining us, Jer.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, James?
I don't know. How do we normally end these things?
I mean, normally, we make some bad jokes or something like that. Maybe abort! Paul, help!
For Weisling, and James, and Kathleen, I'm Jer. Thank you for joining us. Cut to black.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.